Mr. Hill, what has television given you?
Well, nervous dyspepsia, indigestion, heartburn, all sorts of things like that, you know.
There are moments in television history that don't just mark the end of a show. They mark the end of an era. For millions of viewers across Britain and around the world, The Benny Hill Show was more than just a comedy program. It was a weekly ritual, a shared laugh, a beloved institution that had woven itself into the fabric of popular culture for more than 3 decades. The sound of Yankee sax alone was enough to bring a smile to the faces of audiences from Southampton to Sydney, from London to Los Angeles. Benny Hill wasn't simply a comedian. He was a phenomenon, a one-man entertainment machine whose mischievous grin, impeccable timing, and bottomless reservoir of comic invention had made him one of the most recognized faces on the planet. But fame, no matter how enormous, is never permanent. And for The Benny Hill Show, the end came not gradually, not quietly, but with a jolt, a cultural collision that exposed just how dramatically the world had changed around a program that had refused to change with it. A particular sketch, a gathering storm of criticism, a pivotal moment of controversy, and suddenly the curtain was falling on one of British television's greatest institutions. The question that has fascinated comedy historians, cultural critics, and devoted fans ever since is simple. What exactly happened? What was the scene, the moment, that finally, irreversibly, took The Benny Hill Show off the air for good? To answer that question properly, we need to go back to the beginning. Because the cancellation of The Benny Hill Show wasn't a single event. It was the final act of a long, complicated story, one that began with a boy from Southampton who dreamed of making people laugh, and ended with a cultural reckoning that would reshape British television comedy forever. Alfred Hawthorne Hill was born on January 21, 1924, in Southampton, Hampshire. From the very beginning, laughter seemed to run in his blood. His grandfather, Henry Hill, had been a circus clown, and though his father Alfred Sr. had traded the grease paint for the more sober profession of managing a surgical appliance shop, the spirit of performance clearly skipped a generation and landed squarely on young Alfred's shoulders. He attended Taunton School in Southampton, where he showed more interest in making his classmates laugh than in academic distinction. Before finding his true calling, Hill worked an extraordinary variety of jobs. He sold goods at Woolworths, drove a milk float through the early morning streets of Southampton, operated a bridge, and even played drums in a band. Each of these experiences gave him something invaluable, a deep familiarity with ordinary working-class life, the rhythms and textures of everyday British existence that would later infuse his comedy with an authenticity that audiences instinctively recognized and loved. Hill wasn't performing from a distance. He was performing from life. His entry into show business came through the stage door of a touring theatrical revue, where he worked as an assistant stage manager. It was unglamorous, demanding work, but it gave him an education in stagecraft that no drama school could have provided. He learned about timing, not just the timing of a punchline, but the timing of an entire evening's entertainment. He learned about audiences, how they breathe together, how they laugh together, how they need to be coaxed and then surprised. These were lessons he would carry with him for the rest of his life. When World War II arrived, Hill was called up for military service in 1942. He trained as a mechanic with the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers, later driving trucks and operating searchlights. His deployment to Normandy in September 1944 placed him at one of the most critical and dangerous junctures of the entire conflict. But it was his eventual transfer to the Combined Services Entertainment Division that would prove most consequential for his future. Performing for troops, men who were exhausted, frightened, and desperately in need of laughter, Hill sharpened his instincts as a comedian in the most demanding school imaginable. If you could make a soldier laugh in those circumstances, you could make anyone laugh anywhere. After the war, Hill adopted his stage name as a tribute to his great comedic hero, the American Jack Benny, whose impeccable deadpan timing and masterful radio presence had captivated him. Armed with this new identity, Benny Hill set out to conquer British entertainment. His first significant break came on radio. On October 5, 1947, Hill debuted on Variety Bandbox, a well-regarded BBC radio program that served as a launching pad for comedy talent. His sharp wit and natural ease in front of a microphone impressed listeners and producers alike. But Hill understood instinctively that his future lay in television. a medium that was just beginning to flex its enormous cultural muscles in post-war Britain. By 1950 he was appearing on television, and the results were immediate. The visual dimension of the medium unlocked something in Hill that radio could never fully accommodate. He could now deploy his face, that magnificently expressive, rubbery, mischievous face, along with his body, his physicality, his gift for transforming himself into an endless gallery of comic characters. Physical comedy, visual gags, the carefully choreographed chaos of slapstick, all of these became signature elements of a style that was uniquely and unmistakably his own. On January 15, 1955, the Benny Hill Show premiered on the BBC. It was immediately distinctive. Drawing on the rich tradition of British music hall entertainment, Hill constructed a format that blended live stage sketches with pre-recorded segments, creating a fluid, energetic television experience that felt both familiar and fresh. His humor leaned on slapstick, double entendres, parody, and visual comedy, elements with deep roots in British comic tradition, delivered with a modern, televisual sensibility. The supporting cast was crucial to the show's success. Patricia Hayes, Jeremy Hawke, Peter Vernon, and the diminutive, bald-headed Jackie Wright, who became one of the show's most beloved figures as the perpetual target of Hill's gleeful head-slapping routines, all contributed to a chemistry that felt genuinely collaborative. Co-writer Dave Freeman helped shape Hill's material throughout the 1950s and into the early 1960s, providing an important creative partnership that kept the show fresh and inventive. In 1969, the show made a pivotal transition, moving from the BBC to Thames Television. This change transformed everything. Instead of weekly episodes, the show adopted a format of one-hour specials, lavishly produced, carefully crafted programs that gave Hill enormous creative latitude. Production values soared. The comedy became more ambitious, more elaborate, more visually inventive. And the audience responded with extraordinary enthusiasm. By 1971, the show was attracting over 21 million viewers, a staggering figure that made it one of the most watched programs on British television. The Thames years also brought the show to the world. Eventually broadcast in over 140 countries, the Benny Hill Show achieved something rare in comedy. It transcended language and culture. Hill's physical humor, his reliance on visual gags and universal human situations, meant that audiences who spoke no English at all could still laugh at the screen. In the United States, the show was syndicated across television networks, earning Emmy Award nominations for Outstanding Variety in 1980 and 1981. In 1984, Hill received the prestigious Rose d'Or Award, cementing his status as a truly international comedy figure. In 1972, he had already received the BAFTA Television Award for Best Writer, recognition that confirmed what his fans already knew. Benny Hill wasn't just a performer, he was a genuinely gifted creative artist. But even at the height of his success, the seeds of controversy were quietly germinating. And to understand the nature of the storm that eventually broke, it is necessary to understand something about the world the Benny Hill Show inhabited, and the world that was gradually forming around it. The humor of the Benny Hill Show had always been rooted in a particular comic tradition, bawdy, irreverent, cheerfully smutty, and fundamentally good-natured in its own estimation. Double entendres, scantily clad women, slapstick chases, pompous authority figures brought low. These were elements with a lineage stretching back through British seaside postcards, music hall comedy, and centuries of popular entertainment that delighted in the carnivalesque overturning of social proprieties. Hill was not inventing a tradition. He was inheriting and updating one. The show's most iconic recurring element was its famous run-off chase sequence, the frenetic, madcap sprint that typically closed each episode. Filmed using a technique called undercranking, which involved shooting at a slower frame rate and playing the footage back at normal speed, these sequences created an exaggerated, almost cartoonish acceleration of movement. Police officers, vicars, grandmothers, and scantily clad young women careened across the screen in glorious, anarchic chaos, all set to the rollicking, irresistible beat of Yakety Sax by Boots Randolph, a piece of music so thoroughly associated with Hill that it became universally known as the Benny Hill theme. In 2015, it was voted the #1 TV theme in an ITV special, a remarkable testament to its grip on popular memory. In the 1980s, the show introduced what became perhaps its most controversial element, Hill's Angels. This was a dance troupe composed of young, attractive women who appeared in choreographed routines and comedic sketches, often as the objects of Hill's comically exaggerated desire and pursuit. Their presence added a new dimension of glamour and physical spectacle to the program. Sue Upton, one of the original and longest-serving angels, became a genuine fan favorite. Jane Leeves, who would later achieve international fame as Daphne in the hit American sitcom Frasier, gained her early television experience as one of Hill's angels to T.O. Hill and his supporters. All of this was harmless fun, a continuation of a long and legitimate tradition of broadly comic, mildly risque entertainment. But to a growing number of critics, journalists, and comedians, it was beginning to look like something quite different. It was beginning to look like a relic, not just outdated, but actively harmful. The sketch that crystallized all of these tensions, the moment that transformed simmering discontent into open cultural warfare, came in the late 1980s. By this point, British society had undergone profound changes in its attitudes toward gender, representation, and the responsibilities of popular entertainment. Second-wave feminism had fundamentally altered the conversation about how women were depicted in media. A new generation of comedians was emerging who prided themselves on a sharper, more socially conscious approach to humor. The specific sketch that proved most inflammatory was a parody of a beauty pageant. In it, Hill played a leering, ogling judge surveying a lineup of scantily clad women with a crude, unabashedly sexualized gaze. The sketch made no attempt at subtlety. It wallowed in the objectification of its female participants with a cheerful, unironic enthusiasm that Hill clearly considered perfectly acceptable comedy. To him, it was pantomime, broad, theatrical, safely absurd. To a significant portion of the viewing public and the critical community, it was something else entirely, a naked celebration of exactly the attitudes toward women that society was working hard to challenge and dismantle. The sketch aired at precisely the wrong cultural moment. Or perhaps, more accurately, it aired at precisely the right moment for those who had long been waiting for a definitive example of what they believed was wrong with the Benny Hill show. It became a flashpoint, a moment around which the accumulated frustrations of critics, feminists, and progressive commentators could crystallize into a clear and powerful argument. The argument was simple: this is not harmless fun. This is not innocent smut in the great British tradition. This is a program that treats women as props, as objects, as creatures existing solely for the visual gratification of a male audience. And it is using the enormous platform of primetime television to normalize and reinforce those attitudes.